So we're talking about the future of media, post-digital world. And I think Blurb, just to give a little background, has kind of gone about it the opposite way to most people. So we started a few years ago making these things, right? Beautiful photographic books, full color, in jobs of one. So you go to one of our factories and you'll see book, 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 and they're all different, which I personally find amazing, having come from a mass production environment where everything was same, same, same. And so while everybody else was going digital, we were going physical, and now we're going back the other way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of where we think books are going. So a few stats about the business. We've been going for about 8 years, trading for about 6 of those. Last year we shipped just short of 2 million books to over about 70 countries, and we had almost 1 million paying customers. So we've got a reasonable scale in this, and we do B2B and B2C. So often people use these things for marketing collateral. But I think the one I'm going to focus on is authors through our platform. So we let people produce their own book in 1s, 2s, 10s, whatever quantity they fancy, and then sell them via our platform. So we're going into ebooks. Why is that? Well, I think one of the reasons is when you see kids picking things like this up and kind of pinching the images, right? You know it's time to start thinking about devices, big time. So many people have got devices. I think pretty much everybody in this room has an e-reader. Whether they use it as such or not, that's kind of up to them. Right? Now, I never thought I'd do it, but I often find myself reading books on my telephone. Tiny, tiny little screen. But it's in your pocket, and that convenience often outweighs the other things. And the other reason that we see ourselves going into it now is that we think the economics work well for the type of authors that we're working with. So some big companies, especially in publishing, really struggle with ebooks. They see it as taking away their traditional business, eroding their margin. For us, we think it works just great. So I'm going backwards, but let's try the other way now. So ebooks come in many flavors, and I think the evolution that's happening very, very quickly now is going to make a big difference to us. So it started out, it's just a long list of text. And if you're lucky, it reflows itself into different formats, but that's basically all it is. Right? It doesn't really fit with our heritage, beautiful photo books and that sort of textbook. Well, then you can do kind of PDF-based stuff, but that doesn't scale so well. The interaction is kind of poor. Then Apple came along and very kindly came up with the fixed format EPUB book, which looks much more like a book, feels more like a book, but it still doesn't do anything. And then we've got somewhere out there this kind of holy grail of EPUB 3 and HTML5. So there's all these things sort of floating around. But I think the one that's made the biggest splash recently is Apple launching their iBooks Author. And it's still fairly early days, but you can see some of the things that people are doing. So now you've got ebooks that, as well as full color, have interactivity, three-dimensional display in them, video, and it's starting to do things which are compelling. You cannot replicate them in a physical book. Now, we still see that there's a place in the world for physical books. I think that what will happen is people keep them, they stay with the quality. But as these things start to evolve, they're going to do things that you can't really live without, and you can't get in a physical medium. One of those that has been talked about, and we're very excited about, is the social book. So right now, things are kind of static. You can start to see some social features coming into ebooks, but you can think of a story as an evolutionary thing. It's not static, it's not fixed. Right? The author can communicate directly with the audience, and that's fairly new to publishing. In publishing, often the gap between the guy who actually produced, or the woman who actually produced the story, and the people consuming it was massive. They never got any feedback at all, apart from sales numbers. Now you can have a direct dialogue with those people, and the story can evolve. So you can have, and there have been some experiments like this, an interactive thing where the audience actually has a role in collaborating with the author. It's an entirely new medium in a way. So what I did here is I often read on the Kindle app, even though I don't own a Kindle. Right? Sometimes I just like to stay up with the technology. And they do this thing that always gets me where it shows you that 50 other people highlighted this bit of text. Right? And I always find myself kind of going, that's really interesting, but why did they highlight that bit of text? So what I can see very soon is you start to put layers of data around the books, and you start to see these things being discussion forums, further reading, extra information to support your reading experience, and taking you straight into the supporting material that makes the whole thing more interesting. So right now, it's still the linear dialogue, or sort of linear narrative that we're all used to in books. And often you find yourself, I'm sure everybody in here who's used an ebook will have seen this, is you pop off, you go through Google, you find a bit of information, then you come back to the story. Sometimes you forget to come back to the story. And I think those things are going to get bundled in with the ebooks. So you'll get video, you'll get audio, you'll get all the supporting data. And that brings up some questions, really, about how you monetize that as a model. It's very easy here to see the desirability of it. So it's a great thing. Wouldn't it be fantastic if all that information's there and the reading experience is made so much more attractive? But how on earth does anybody make money out of it? And we're seeing, we've been selling ebooks now alongside our physical books for about 4 or 5 months. We've gone in at a very experimental level, so we're only doing them for iPad and for iPhones. So we haven't tried to cover the whole market, but we wanted to get people paying for them, because I think it's much more important to get people voting with their money than just using a free application. And what we've seen is we're starting to sell them in, a few thousand a month, basically, but not massive quantities, but there's a few thousand published authors. And we're seeing people starting to take control of the business model for themselves. So what we would see is that it's the authors themselves, predominantly, who will work out how to monetize it. We're there as a platform. Right? Now, I know that there's some of the big boys in the industry, your Apples and your Amazons, playing in this space. But I think that they've got so many vested interests that we've got a position in the middle that we can take. And one thing we're seeing is people who are bloggers becoming authors. So they've got a lot of content, and they might push out initially physical books they were doing, but they're now starting to do ebooks. Maybe they'll do 3 or 4 a year and sell them to their blog audience. And you can make a living out of that, because the economics of the ebook allow you to take a much bigger share. So you may sell a book like this for sort of 20 euros, but the author themselves might get 2. So you sell an ebook for 5 euros, you're making more money than you would out of one of them. So that economics really favors the smaller author. So we're seeing that as a sort of an emerging business model. What I've called micro segments here, there's a whole load of things that with a traditional publishing model, it's just simply too small to go out and sell. So I'll give an example. There's a guy who's done a book about a very small village in the north of England where his family grew up. Right? And he's now going out and selling that. Now, there's only 100 people who actually live in that village. Right? So you could pretty much sell all of them a copy and still not make any money. But because it's so cheap and easy for people to do it, he's actually doing that one, and then he's doing another village, and another village, and another village. So you can actually develop quite a small individual sales model, but something that can scale relatively easily. So it's kind of opening up new ways of making a living for people who are starting out as authors or who want to do it on the side of another career. Communities of enthusiasts is also something we're seeing that is quite successful. So within our platform, we have a number of communities who sort of communicate around their specialities. One of those is people who restore cars. So they've been doing physical books for a number of years, where they'll take photographs at each stage of the lifetime of a car restoration project. But just think how much more compelling that is with video content. Because one thing they're really keen on is not making the same mistake as the last guy. So it's all very well seeing his photographs of this rusty Hulk becoming a shining beauty, but you want to know how he managed to get the engine out without smashing it. Right? And all those sorts of things. And the video content is really, really good. So what we're seeing is that the communities are kind of picking their own curators, and sometimes they're prepared to pay these people to actually aggregate all their content. So it's sort of somewhere in between a magazine and a book. Right? So it's a book with as many editions as seem appropriate. It's not got the same periodicity as a magazine. And we think that people will start to pay subscriptions for this. So at the moment, we haven't built the sales model to support that, but we can see that people buy it, and then it just continues to change. So we think in future you'll see what are effectively sort of book-cum curated collections around a specialist subject that people pay a subscription for. And the other thing we're seeing is that people are happily giving away ebooks to sell print. So you can, if you think about a book like this, if you're a photographer, this is what people want, the physical thing. You cannot, as yet, you can't replicate this experience with an electronic device. But if you give them a taste of it, you let them see these things in an electronic format, then they're more likely to go out and buy the physical book. And we've also seen some people looking at selling by the chapter, and there's been some big experiments that I think people have seen around that. So really, it's just to say that this is happening right now. I think the addition of color and the prevalence of the new devices makes it a whole much more attractive market to us. And reflecting some of the comments that Nate was making, what we're trying to do is to make it as transparent as possible to the people who are creating the works. Right? So they're the guys, they want to be creative. They don't want to be getting weighed down by technology or tools or formats, all of these things. They just want to get on and produce their thing. And then the other piece we need to do is to help them to sell it. Because right now, if you want to be a small author, you have to learn all about online marketing, social media, all those sorts of things. Well, each author learns those things freshly, and we learn them once, and then we can communicate it to the other guys. So that's kind of a hint, I think, of where we think ebooks are going and the sort of work that we'll be doing as a business. So thank you very much. I hope I've stuck to my 10 minutes.